Hi. Well, like the other topics, this topic, which is the mind of the leader, we need a few days to start to really address, to give some justice to this topic. And I have 2 pages of suggested reference material for the people that want to go deeper. And my distinguished colleague here, the panelists are Dr. Kiliger Passigli from Aero Disaster Department, Professor Kovacevic, and also Professor Winston Nagan, to my right, a distinguished lawyer and professor of law at the University of Florida. I'm Alberto Zucconi, and I would restrict my rapid, in half an hour, input to some of the things that I think are important to keep in mind when we talk about leadership. What I'm talking about has a vast literature and an interest amount of research. My bias, since I'm a pupil and collaborator, the late Dr. Carl Rogers, one of the father of humanistic psychology, is that focusing more on health than in psychopathology. But I want to say it, so you see why I would speak on that. Well, undoubtedly we live in an interesting and dramatic time. Globalization and more complexity. So, to meet our present and future challenges, we need a new and effective way to cope effectively, and we need also effective leaders that help us to win those challenges. Unfortunately, the state of human affairs shows clearly there are a lot of obstacles, a lot of barriers that make for us and also for leaders to understand the complexity and the real nature of the problem we urgently need to face. In other words, I'm talking about sometimes an ignorance, but more psychologically speaking, forms of denial. When reality is too threatening, human beings defend themselves by negating or distorting or creating somebody else enemy that has all the faults. Anyhow, I want to cite one of our founders of the World Academy of Art and Science, Albert Einstein. I agree fully with him that we cannot solve the problems of today at the level of thinking, with the whole thinking that created those exactly those problems. And we have all problems and they're all interrelated. And so, to paraphrase Einstein, because I think it's dramatically true, I robustly want to assert that we cannot solve the problems of today following the leaders who led us in this mess. A little bit like my friend and colleague Alexander was pointing out, with different, more elegant words. A leader. What is a leader? And here we would be able to discuss a lot. Anyhow, minimum, at any level, a leader is defined by somebody who leads, for what I'm saying. But that is not automatically good news that we have leaders that lead us, because history speaks very clearly. Often famous leaders are famous especially for their destructivity, their cruelty, and their psychopathology. There is a long tradition of studying these dynamics and this phenomena. Le Bon from the 1800s, Erich Fromm, Adorno, Laswell, that Professor Nagel was a pupil and collaborator and was one of our presidents at the academy. Wilhelm Reich, psychoanalysis, many psychoanalytic leaders, and many others studied the psychopathology of toxic, destructive leaders. While other scientists, social scientists, went and studied the other face of the movement, effective leaders. What was, that characterized those. And I'll give some examples of both. So, Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers, Thomas Gordon, Buchenthal, and many others did research in the personality traits of healthy and effective leaders. Robert Hare asserts that the psychopaths are social predators who charge, manipulate, and ruthlessly plow their way through life, leaving a broad trail of shattered expectation and empty wallets. Completely lacking in conscience and feelings for others, they selfishly take what they want and do as they please, violating social norms, expectation without the slightest sense of guilt and remorse. Basically, the research we have about dysfunctional leaders, summing it up, they have a lot of charm, superficial people, glib, manipulative, grandiose sense of self, very narcissistic, pathologically lying. They have a lot of difficulty in feelings, shallow emotion, or no emotion at all, sometimes the sociopaths. Incapacity to love, just for the above, need for constant stimulation, they are risk-taking all the time, callous, total lack of empathy, irresponsibility, unreliability, developmental problems, they had a lot of problems during their youth, often delinquent, juvenile delinquent record, promiscuous sexual behavior, parasite lifestyle, and quite creative as criminals. The narcissistic leader promotes a personality cult, almost a new religion, with rituals, temples, worships, and mythology. You have seen an example, even in architecture, from fascist and Marxist-Leninist regime, cult of the leader. Nuova China, a New China press agency, I remember, have a book that has all the clippings of the miracles done by the Red Book. The Red Book exposed to a field of watermelon, magically, miraculously make them bright. A red book given to a deaf boy, making him hear again. Very interesting, because every religious tradition has this kind of lore. And been, these many narcissistic and psychopathic leaders are the hostage of their so-imposed rigid way to experience reality, their ideology. The narcissistic leader lacks, as we said, empathy for their subject, their citizen. The citizen is just a tool to be manipulated, sacrificed in order to reach the leader inflated and grandiose destiny. They always have a superhero, destiny. Since 1985, Gustave Le Bon, a well-known social scientist, affirmed that leaders are often people so driven by ideological faith that they have almost lost the instinct for self-preservation. I remember once in San Francisco, I interviewed Jones. I was writing a book about untraditional movements. One of those was in San Francisco, the Reverend Jones. the one that led then his people, 500 people, to commit suicide in Guyana. And I come out of this talk, of this interview, said, well, the guy is a psychopath, but most impressive is how blind are his followers. So we're talking about leaders, but I don't want to give the impression that the leaders are just born or come on this earth from Mars. So there is a complex relationship that William Reich wrote in A Mass Psychology of Fascism between leaders and followers. It's a co-construction. And so ideologies, the tool used by despots to gain and retain power, and through the ideology, the tyrant expresses his narcissism and creates solidarity with his followers. Erich Fromm, the famous psychoanalyst, suggested in 1941 that people might be attracted and choose to leaders because basically leaders give them an option than to be always in fear of taking the right decision. So they repress and delegate the leader acritically so they don't have to have the anxiety. Well, Erich Fromm also had a lot of writings about Adolf Hitler and Stalin. He called them malignant narcissists. For Fromm, Hitler was an inverted human. His unconscious was his conscious. He acted out our most repressive drive, fantasy, and wishes. Lasker took from psychoanalysis in analyzing that, so I'm not going to do anything on that. Our friend Winston is much more grounded on that. But you remember what Hannah Arendt called the banality of evil. Just an ordinary, mentally disturbed failure, a member of a mentally disturbed and fallen nation, Hitler, that lived through disturbed and fallen times. He was a perfect mirror for a channel, a voice, and the very depth of our souls. The narcissistic leader prefers the sparkle and glamour of well-orchestrated illusion to the tedium and method of real accomplishment. His reign is all smoke and mirrors, devoid of substance, consisting of mere appearance and mass delusion. And I want to imply with these words of Erich Fromm that he was just that. He had a real leadership and charismatic. When the end gets near, the narcissistic psychopathic leader is enter the acting out phase, lash out and erupt. They attack with virulence and ferocity compatriots, allies, neighbors, and foreigners. All populist charismatic leaders believe that they are having a special connection with the people, a relationship that direct, almost mythical contact that challenge, transcend the normal communication channels. And so he's projecting on these people, his people are projecting on him, and he can justify the destruction, the butchering of these people, projection, paranoid feelings that they are not anymore doing what he's doing for them with great sacrifice to bring them to their destiny. What we call really praising. Erich Fromm believed that other people possess an intense narcissism, destructiveness, and a profound inability to relate to others. Hitler's destructive leadership skills were matched only very few in the world. As the Chancellor of Germany, he waged a most destructive war, not only on neighboring nations, but to millions of his own citizens. Remember, he wanted to destroy Jews, opponents, ideology opponent, homosexual, mentally handicapped, who was not conforming to the race of blonde, tall people. How crazy, but how crazy the people. This guy was ugly, with a funny mustache and hair, and had a mixed Jewish blood, More crazy than this. It was not just, if Hitler had said all that and people laughed, were laughing at him, there wouldn't be any consequence of the Hitler. Mussolini, sometime in Italy they show, some film of Mussolini. Nowadays, somebody is saying, oh, this is a comic movie, look at this guy, he's too stereotyped, he's not believable, he's an imitation of Mussolini. No, he's the real thing. Mussolini really was acting like this funny monkey, jumping up and down, and the Italian people had orgasm, women and men, our Duce, our leader, very interesting. I think Reich had something on his book, Psychology of Fashion. Stalin was more composed, but a nice combination of paranoid personality disorder, alcohol abuse, very intelligent and cruel, and he created, with this recipe, tremendous mass killings. Stalin controlled everybody through fear of death, fear of torture, fear of exile. It's interesting reading some records that people, leaders in the Communist Party would confess under torture, but they were innocent. When they were liberated or rehabilitated, they said, what did you confess? I did it for the party. That's very, very interesting. Very interesting. Like martyrs do it for the religion they are defending. I also want to say, people say that always underline the concept that reality is a social construction. I think it's very important to understand how we live, we humans. Not in reality, but in the social construction of the reality. Not in reality, but in the construction of our experience. That's why the same experience can be read in so many different colors by different people. Anyhow, Wilhelm Reich talks a little bit about the construction, the social construction, and says in his book, from the standpoint of social development, the family cannot be considered the basis of the authoritarian state, only as one of the most important institutions which support it, because the family is growing in that social construction of reality. It is, however, its central reactionary germ cell, the most important place of reproduction of the reactionary and conservative individual. Being itself caused by the authoritarian system, the family becomes the most important institution for its conservation. For having written this book, Wilhelm Reich, that was a Marxist, was kicked out by the Austrian Communist Party because they were furious because what he said about fascism applied also to what we call red fascism. Thank God they are also good, effective, functional leaders. And they have this, traits. The leader is a fully functioning person. These are, we will see from studies of Maslow, Rogers, Bugenthal, Thomas Gordon, and others. An effective leader is a person that feels, not that fakes feelings, but that feels genuine respect, trust, an empathic understanding of the people around him or her. And of course, in order to do so, he has to feel respect and empathic understanding of himself. You cannot give others what you don't have. The leader, as a high performer, So I'm not, of course, eliminating the need that you're knowledgeable about what you live in and all that, the technical skills, so to speak, intelligent and all that, but also he or she is a role model and possesses the psychological, emotional, interpersonal skill necessary to perform a high level consistently. A leader that is willing to recognize mistakes and learn from them. I think one of the most important sources of wisdom is to learn from one's mistakes and admitting it and asking for feedback, honest feedback. The leader is a team builder if it's an effective, and so value greatly the other people's contribution, is trusting and empowering his team. The leader has to be also a decision maker, meaning not afraid to take decisions when it's needed, but he does that after brainstorming, listening to everybody. The leader is a change agent also, because envision. Alexander used a very interesting metaphor, anchors the future. A leader has to be a prophet, like Alexander was saying, to envision a better future and to become a change agent that makes this future possible. And also somebody that gets real satisfaction in seeing his people accomplishing things. He's not a micromanager, he doesn't want control, but he delegates and takes pride in seeing the success of his people that is the world. The leader, oh sorry, I went back. The healthy personal experience, says Michel Scholler and Duque in 2009, well-being and satisfaction with the past. These are the attributes. Flow of experience, joy, sensual pleasure, happiness in the present, living in the here now, optimism, hope, faith. The healthy individual has positive personal traits such as the capacity for love and vocation, courage, interpersonal skill, aesthetic sensitivity, perseverance, forgiveness, originality, and future mindedness, talent, and wisdom. The healthy person at the social level has responsibility, nurturance, altruism, civility, moderation, tolerance, and work ethics. Let's see some examples. George Washington, for example, that led the American Revolution and was the first president of the USA. In a previous course, Gary Jacobs gave a great illustration of many leaders, among which George Washington. And he was famous to be able to make the clear decision in very confusing and difficult times. A great, great leaders are not just of the West. It would be funny that we had only Western personality. One considered by everybody is the so-called Ashoka the Great. He was great because he was was a king of the Indian Empire of Maurya, and this was around 269 before Christ. And he was a person that the Chronicle of the time reported as kind and good-hearted leader. And when he saw all the suffering of this bloody Kalinga war, he was so impacted by the suffering of his people and the enemy that he renounced to his role of king, warrior king, and went into the retreat and started a new career that he thought better than the leader is somebody that share the wisdom of the heart. And so he went around just as a Buddhist monk preacher, a lay Buddhist monk preacher. I don't know how many of these today leaders would be willing to be impacted by the suffering of their people and able to lead all the privilege and power. Another, this is, in my opinion, one of the most important leaders all the time. I had the chance for my work to talk to people that knew him and also close relatives. I visited in Bombay his house and saw how he lived modestly. I was very impressed. Anyhow, reading what he wrote, he was, you know, an ordinary boy and known then later as the father of the nation. Certainly, he had the leadership and charisma, and he won the British that had not such a benign empire just through non-violence and talking to the mind and the heart, not only of his people. Remember how many times he said, I'm going to starve myself to death if you are violent to his own people. But he was able to touch the heart and the mind of the British. That's how he won. You know, he could talk to them and understand their psychology. And although non-violent, he was very successful to undo what the arms probably would not have done. Another great leader of non-violence, Martin Luther King, and he was the well-known leader of the civil rights movement. He was also a clergyman, and remember Selma and all this. He was courage, perseverance, and deep value. Very, very profound leader. I never had the chance to talk with his family members, but in Berkeley in '68, when there was the student revolution, I spoke with people that marched with Martin Luther King and heard that he touched people's heart, and they were really touched by his leadership because he was real. He really believed in what he preached. And another fantastic leader, Nelson Mandela, another that through non-violence brought South Africa to become disenfranchised, from the chain of apartheid to a country that instead of what could have happened, retribution, civil war, he always with Tutu, went and constructed, reconciliation. So an integrated society could start from there instead of going into destruction. And then I want to mention a woman, Aung San Suu Kyi, that just recently won the Peace Prize, and this gentle and small woman in such a strength of value, conviction, and courage that prison could not deter her, leaving her family, renouncing to everything. And I heard only her to speak like in television. That I was deeply impressed how strong can be a gentle person. These are lessons to be also behavior to be treasured. My point is that since we're talking about this, it would be crucial to understand better how reality is socially construed and how individuals and organizations construe their experience. Then we will better understand why a lot of narcissistic and psychopathic leaders find themselves a lot of adoring followers. And I think it would make us understand a little better how parents, schools, and communities can promote the development of healthy personality and so doing of effective leaders. I'm talking not about the heads of nations. I'm talking about having the national leaders emerge. So we need to ask ourselves some basic question, Andy. How our social and personal selves are socially construed? How we're doing now is really effective in creating sustainable development of human potentiality in all the people and respecting and promoting the natural environment, or is dysfunctional? I think the whole thing is very nitty-gritty, is how we construe reality in an empowering or disempowering way. These are some examples, when we have democratic relationship, we are empowering. Authoritarian, we are disempowering. When we have a society with equal rights and opportunities, empowering. The opposite with the oppression and discrimination. Promoting responsibility is empowering. Promoting passivity is the opposite. And so. I'm doing quickly because the time is short, and I want to end with addressing our attention to what is needed also with serious research to draw a compass of what is an effective leader, and I think certainly healthy personality is one of those, but also ethics applied on the decisional tree. One has to consider things systemically, intersectionally, but also ethically. And also, I robustly assert from the research that an effective leader has to possess a capacity for respect, empathic understanding, but also capacity for deep contact. The research shows the healthy individual, for example, is normally feeling deep contact not only with fellow human beings, but all with the living things. Nowadays, unfortunately, these kind of things are remotely referred to mystics and holy people, but actually it's the normal base of human beings that are not alienated from themselves, and being alienated themselves also from others and all the living things. So we needed to bring a compelling new vision. And here at the Academy, we call it a new paradigm in education. Because we needed to promote these natural qualities, or better, prevent the kids are taking away these natural qualities, and so work at the level of individual, family, school, organization, community, society, culture, and vice versa. It's a full circle of full improving. So the respect, empathy, authenticity components that has 80 years of research, Carl Rogers and others have done, and until 2014 we have the research confirmed the original hypothesis. We need to empower people from elementary schools on, and the school years can be crucial to promote effective and resilient citizens. My friend Donato Finnecker-Passili is an expert of resilience. What about starting resilience in the family, elementary school, and being part of the problem, becoming part of the solution? Thank you. we have our friends that we started with Winston Nagan, 10 minutes each.
Well, first of all, I thank Alberto for this tremendous introduction to the issue of leadership and its multidimensionality. He initiated this with the notion that clearly there's good leadership and bad leadership. And then the question basically is, how can we predict good leadership? How can we predict bad leadership? What are the factors that we should take into account? And this is a relatively new field, I think, historically speaking. But an insight into this came from one of Maslow's early books, Psychopathology and Politics, published in 1930, which essentially formed the foundations of a new field called political psychology. And one of the points made there was that if you really want to get a sense of the impact of personality on culture, on law, on society, then you cannot look at the problem as a problem of taxidermy. You've got to look at it as a problem of biography. You have to know something about the person. And he did develop some of the methods of clinical psychology, the intensive interview method, to basically get a sense of the types of factors that make for the person who's oriented to power in particular, and from that the notion of a power personality. I will just mention, since Maslow's work, there have been a number of studies done to differentiate a number of political typologies, and these would include the authoritarian personality, the totalitarian personality, and the personalities that are somewhat pathological in the sense that they are narcissists. Narcissists feature even in today's spectrum of political leaders widely, although it's a matter of degree. And narcissism would cross-cut with the obsessive-compulsive personality, the Machiavellian, the authoritarian, the paranoid, the totalitarian, and of course the democratic personality. So that's really sort of, if you like, from a person-centered perspective, the issue that we have to confront. The other aspect of this that brings a matter of social realism is Alberto's reference to the issue of the human perspective on destructiveness. And it's been well stated that humanity's great enemy is humanity. So that tells us why it is important that we have a better understanding of political leadership and our capacity to predict good from bad. At least from a point of view of political psychology, Laszlo isolated the notion of homo politicus, the political man, and defined it as displacing private motives onto public objects and subjecting the former to rationalization in the public interest. Now that's an equation that's loaded with a lot of implications. I can't go through all of them, but one of the pervasive themes about leadership is energy. And so the question then becomes, what are the roots? Is that energy coming from God or Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha or Confucius, or is it coming from the individual himself in a better understanding of mind and the factors that influence mind and personality? It was Maslow's view that the energy level, the impulse that comes from something which Freud described as the unconscious. And one of the most important functions of the mind is that it seeks to repress the unconscious because it seeks to repress, shall we say, the unpleasant features of it. But that doesn't mean that it's completely successful in this, because what does happen is that the issue will come out in a different way, and when it comes out in a different way, it's unrelated to the original impulse that projects it, but it is a major energy form. And when that energy form emerges, the personality then has that option of essentially directing that energy or being influenced by the environment to direct that energy, which means that it's energy that can be directed in a negative direction or a positive direction, and we can't control that variable. However, if the person comes from a family that is oriented to positive values, goes to school, positive values in a community, there's a good chance that that energy will be directed in the form of leadership energy that embraces those public objects and promotes them. And if those public objects are indeed as defensible as its internal rationalization suggests, then of course we have a potentiality of constructive leadership that has constructive political impacts and so forth. But that doesn't mean that the notion of reproducing leadership is an easy thing. There are far too many factors which can shape leadership that can go in a dramatically negative direction. And indeed, if the intensity and duration of deprivations in the early childhood of the person is sufficiently severe, it may well manifest itself later as some form of mental illness. And of course, there are many versions of it today than there were at the time that Basel was writing, so I won't go through all of those, but paranoia and so forth are certainly well-developed notions today. So I think we've probably lost sight of the importance of the psychological insights that Freud and his followers and the clinical psychologists have brought to this field. But I suspect that it's one of the most important things that we can do to know more about the biography of the person, to understand how the person has been oriented to values, which values, and if necessary, influence the person in terms of those values that are indispensable to the public interest. I want to thank Alberto again, and just one or two points to make in addition. He's mentioned these pathologies that can emerge: no empathy, no remorse, very charming and highly narcissistic. And in politics, one of the things we have to be aware of is that because of the unpredictability of leadership, there is a necessity for, shall we say, preventive politics. And I think democratic culture is one of the most important social inventions for the management of power, in the sense that we can't always predict who the good leader will be. And one of the fundamental insights into the nature of democracy is that it's really meant to moderate the exercise of power by making it transparent, responsible, and accountable. And usually the term democracy is accompanied by the term rule of law. And the rule of law is an aspect of the notion of preventive politics. That is to say, since politics is unpredictable, it's important to have mechanisms that can constrain leadership that goes off in the wrong direction. At the same time, democracy has the ability to encourage the emergence of constructive, positive, and creative leadership. And then finally, there are such things as political ideals. And some ideals are extremely important. For example, I'm sure that the socialistic ideal of the withering away of the state carried within itself the notion of the extinction of coercion in social relations. Democracy never goes that far, and so that may not carry quite as much of an appeal, because it seeks to, as I said, moderate and subordinate the exercise of power in the service of something else. The respect for the citizenship of the individual, respect for the human rights of the individual, and ultimately, I think, the respect for the principle of human dignity of all individuals in this society. Thank you.
Thank you to Professor Nagan. And now we honored to have Professor Kovacevic, that is the former ambassador and extraordinary and commissionary of the Republic of Croatia to the Russian Federation, the former Minister of Environment, and former and co-founder of the Croatian Social Liberal Party. 10 minutes.
Thank you. So, as everybody of you could heard, I'm former.
And now you're current status.
Currently, I'm teaching the theories of international relations on the University College for International Relations and Diplomacy in Zagreb. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few words. It's a pleasure to be reminded on the authors I was reading when I was young, Erich Fromm and especially Wilhelm Reich. When I was reading Mass Psychology of Fascism, I thought that it's very, very good description of horrible things which had happened a long time ago. And I thought that something like that would never happen again. But unfortunately, we who were born and who lived in the former Yugoslavia, we witnessed repetition of that ugly and dark side of the history. So that's why I think that it's not only up to leaders, it's only up to followers who are looking for leaders who are congruent with their state of mind, with their frustrations, their disorientation, their disappointments. And I think that if, let's say, German people, or majority, or a lot of German people have not been so much frustrated, Hitler would never become a leader of such a great nation. When I visited the Museum of Holocaust in Washington, it's an impressive museum, but in one moment they presented us a scene from everyday Jewish family life in Germany. And the guy told us, can you imagine that those horrible fascists, that they killed all those people who have been normal as we are? And my question was, yes, it is horrible, but can you tell us who killed them? Those who were killing them, they were ordinary citizens too. So what happened with their mind, with those normal people who at once became beasts, let's say? It's maybe it's injustice to call them beasts, but it's the usual way of naming them. So that's why I think that there must be corresponding state of mind of followers, and those followers are looking for leaders who will promise them to solve all their problems. People who are faced with problems they cannot solve by their means. They are not able to face those problems. They are looking for leaders who are promising that they will solve all problems all over the world. which means that those leaders present themselves as parents, and their followers are children. What is missing there? Adults. In those situations, normal people, adult people, who are not able to solve problems they are supposed to solve, they are trying to find ways out. And such leaders, the destructive leaders, leaders which how to say, which were one of symbolic representation of 20th century, those leaders promised to those followers that they would solve all their problems. It's not. You have mentioned the term "father of the people" or "father of the nation," and you mentioned one extremely positive example, Gandhi. But usually, fathers of the nations are dictators. Fathers and teachers, they know everything, and they know better than you know how you have to behave, what you have to do, what you have to believe, and whom you are supposed to kill. So when a huge number of people want to find father of a nation, father of a state, it means that they are in a kind of, in psychoanalytical terms, regression. They are looking for parents, although they are adults and they are supposed to behave like adult people. As I have mentioned, I thought that such dark side of history would never happen again, but it happened and I witnessed it. And what was the most absurd thing? In former Yugoslavia, we were relatively well informed about the Holocaust, for instance, about war crimes made by Nazis in World War II. But what happened in former Yugoslavia? That all, especially in Bosnia, all three sides, whose leaders were educated in former Yugoslavia and who were well informed about Holocaust and all tragic consequences of that, in fact participated on not such huge scale in arranging the same horrible things as have been done during World War II on our territory. And faced with such facts, sometimes I don't know what to think. Is it possible to influence people not to repeat, not how to say, not to lose their identity as adult persons, and they, in fact, is it possible to avoid situation in which normal people will try to behave as irresponsible persons who are ready to fulfill whatever order their leader is giving to them? I think that the answer is democratic culture. Fortunately, all former Yugoslav states are more or less democratic countries, and I think that democratic ambient will be much more productive for self, how to say, for normal citizens to develop their personalities and to participate in public life, not asking or not looking to find their father.
Thank you, Professor Kovacevic, for such poignant points. And now the third discussant or panelist, our friend and colleague from the Academy of Science and Art, Donato Chineghe-Fassini. He's the head of the Department of ILO Fragile States and Disaster Response Group in Geneva. Please.
Alberto, thank you. What could I say after so many words of wisdom and so many poignant points, as you said, that have been raised. And thank you, first of all, Alberto, for leading us through this maze, or that what could be a maze in terms of distributing ourselves in the traits, the characters of what a leader should be and what a leader should not be. But now, what could I offer? I think I could offer, while we were talking, I jotted down some ideas in terms of personal experience. I think that everybody, all of us, have a personal experience to share. I will, without naming it, I will refer to my activity in the United Nations system for 20 years. And I want to refer to some of the points that you have made. I think we refer to narcissistic leaders. We refer to sometimes paranoid feelings, and on the fact that many of the leaders tend to be acritical and are surrounded by critical courtesans. Well, this is unfortunately a syndrome in many international organizations. I wouldn't say all of them, luckily. But it's true that in many organizations, one time or another, we experience this kind of issues and problems. Again, I'm not making a generalization. It would be to offend the full category of co-workers. This is not the case. I'm simply saying that obviously we have been testimonies of behaviors that tend to simple rituals, as you said, and absence of reality check, absence of, again, as I said, self-criticism, and this is the major point. So I will not name some of those cases, but I have been obviously a witness of those. On the other side, there are behaviors that I would like to name, and that I could refer, again, people that not necessarily are famous leaders, worldwide renowned leaders, but still leaders. One of them that I was fortunate to meet was General Giap. Some people know General Giap, of course, the strategist, Vietnamese strategist. And well, I met him when he was Minister of Industry of Vietnam. And when I entered his private residence, I said to him, sir, I always wanted to meet you. And he, as humble as he was, he said, the same for me, I always wanted to meet you. And the conversation started on that tone. I mean, of course, that gentleman had certain characteristics of composure, of a mode of listening that would put you at ease with yourself, and where language was not a barrier. I mean, whether I spoke good English, he didn't speak good English, it was not a matter. I mean, was the insight, was the ability to recognize one another. And this is why we said before the word recognition, acknowledgement and recognition. I think that this goes beyond borders, goes beyond any kind of, and that can go between an old man, as he was already, and a young man, as I was in those days. I'm talking 25 years ago. But there are other effective leaders who show also to be compassionate, who support subordinates, and admit their own mistakes. Alberto, you said that. And learn from those mistakes, and take responsibility. This is the essential word. Take responsibility for their own mistakes. Because that is the tendency, again, from many so-called or self-appointed or nominated leaders, democratically or not to take responsibility for their own mistakes, but pass them on. I want to name a real gentleman Yakub Khan, who used to be my direct supervisor when I was working, he was the special representative, the Secretary General for Western Sahara. And we were entangled in difficult negotiations in Morocco with Minister Basri, Interior Minister, and at some point he lost track of his brief. And he said to me and his other advisor at some point, you know, I switched off because he thought he had made his point, he thought the negotiation was concluded, and that was that. Well, he realized that he had made a mistake, but he was so good that he could reappropriate himself of his own points and sell them again in such a way to win over his opponent or his antagonist in that very moment to sell what he wanted to say. Visionary, I think, is also important. Visionary and someone that knows how to recognize authority beyond hierarchy. This is also very important point. I think that in order to do so, you have to have a special insight. We will refer to what insight means. We go over and over again when we talk about decision making. But I think that there are certain individuals that have equality in that sense. I want to honor the memory of someone who just passed away, and his name is Yusuf Ismail Baribari, former ambassador of Somalia in Geneva. He died this past Friday in Mogadishu, in Massoud, in his hotel. He was a good friend of mine, but he was a visionary leader, someone who would never compromise in terms of his own values and his own ambitions. He had an ambition. He wanted to substitute piracy with jobs in Bulgaria, and he was working for that. And he was probably becoming the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Somalia. They killed him before he would arrive to that point. Other examples I could offer, since we refer to this part of the world, I had the pleasure of working with Elie Wiesel, who was the Nobel Peace Prize award. And I accompanied him to Mania Chernomorska in the 90s, again in this part of the world. And I think he showed other characteristics of a leader. Someone that had to be patient, that did not use his personal connections where he could have used his personal connections, but he went through the ranks of the organization, of the United Nations, in order to achieve what he wanted to achieve, and then present his own findings. So he showed perseverance and patience. I think these are also very important characteristics of leadership. Another one that obviously is UN related was Sergio Villa de Mello. Sergio Villa de Mello was a very well-known diplomat in the United Nations, and again I was witness of one characteristic of this gentleman, his courage. He was a man who would not give up again, and he negotiated several times air corridors in Sarajevo. I was with him on a couple of occasions, and we were flying from Split to Sarajevo, trying to open these air corridors. And many times we had to go back, because either they were shooting at us, or the weather would not allow us to land. But, you know, he would always see an opening through the clouds. And this was a characteristic of an envisioning leader, someone who would always look beyond what was the immediate obstacle. So I think these are, again, some examples of what could be a good leader. I think to conclude that we should preserve the values. We should preserve the values of these good leaders, whether they are present or past, and defeat complacency. Defeat what sometimes are the daily obstacles to showing up the good qualities of these new leaders, these transformational leaders that we have discussed, in order to have this natural new leader emerge. And this is what we would like to have. So I agree with Alberto that we need a compass for leaders, a new compass for leaders, and I'm sure that through this workshop we will succeed to indicate the true direction.
Thank you for Professor Kineker Basili for this poignant comments. And now, before I pass, there is a question from a friend abroad from Kampala in Uganda that asked, what steps should a teacher take for behavior transformation among high school students? Well, it's easy. There is a mountain of research and some good books would illustrate the success and the accomplishment. One of these is Carl Rogers' Freedom to Learn. Another is Carl Rogers' Freedom to Learn in the 80s. And a lot of research has been carried out by David Aspie and Flora Robach, and there are many books, and if you go to Google, so you'll find a lot of... another thing in Europe, research on 50,000 students and teachers by Reinhard Tausch and Anna-Marie Tausch, and what one can go to Google, just student-centered education or people-centered education. There is a lot of evidence that show that we can have healthier and students that learn more, that are less destructive, if teachers and school principals possess these three necessary and sufficient conditions: respect, empathy, understanding, and they are in good mental health, so they're able to contact and able to contact other people. These are 80 years of research that are very impressive. Of course, why, since we have 80 years of research that show this works and works better and costs less money, why we didn't adopt it everywhere in the world? There is a simple question. It deals with the differential of power that many of my colleagues here have alluded. Being a people-centered, it means that you are a leader and serve the people, not rule and exploit the people. Thank you for our friend, and then from our... another one. They're creeping up. Now we have a Swita from India that says every leader feels his ideology is perfect. How can a leader know for himself if he is a positive or a negative leader? Unfortunately, only a healthy leader would know. The unhealthy one would never even have a phantom of how to get in touch with themselves. And that's why they're bad leaders, they are not in touch with reality. And, more than bad leader, and yeah, there is evil, I think, but I see it as a clinical psychologist and a psychotherapist as an important warp of personality. So what is healthy in every living thing can become an unhealthy, and the question is how we could have the construction of reality that promotes more healthy personality than the opposite. Thank you for your question.
I'd like to thank you, Alberto, and all the other panelists for a very interesting discussion. I wasn't going to make a response, but I thought the question from Kampala I could also respond to, because it seemed to be a very genuine, specific question. It just reminds me of something that I hadn't been thinking of in terms of leadership, and that's what they call the placebo effect. Great leaders are also those who have the capacity to perceive the potential in other people and bring it out. Maybe the most dramatic example I know of is Gandhi. Very few leaders really develop second-level leadership. They shine by their own capacities. But Gandhi had the capacity to systematically identify talents around him. And so after he went, he had Nehru, who was at least as great a leader, and internationally a far greater leader than he was. And there were others domestically who may not be well known here, but at least a half a dozen people emerged as very strong leaders. With regard to teachers, though, specifically, there's been research done a long time ago in the U.S. Simple anecdote is some psychologists went into a primary school and they told the principal that they have developed a test for, what do you call it, late bloomers, for kids who are underperforming who really have great capacity. And they went and administered an ordinary test, and they went back and threw away the test papers and gave a list of all the late bloomers there. And then they informed the principal, and the next year they came back and tested everybody and found that those who had really improved dramatically were the ones the teachers believed were late bloomers with hidden talent. So I'm just trying to apply that to this question from Kampala, that what a teacher can do if they really want to develop leadership qualities in people is assume they're there and look for them. And there may be very different types of leadership and styles of leadership, but to look for the leadership in their students and see what they can do to bring it out.
Great. Please.
Yes, I would like to reflect on that and on what Bojo said about leaders and children and adulthood. What popped up in my mind, in my heart, was the word source. And nowadays we have a big hype about open source, and we have a word that is very in the management is outsourcing. So I made a little notes and will write something about it. That most of the people are outsourcing their own problems to other people for them to resolve them, instead of insourcing them and trust their own source. And this is taught about this is very, very well manipulated also by teachers and by so-called gurus. I happened to listen to 300 webinars this last 3 months in the United States, and always the same story. Let's walk me through it, because I have a proven, easy to follow, predictable, reproducible theory, system, and if you follow this, click the button and you will in heaven. So this is the way they sell it, instead of from this remark, the question is, how can we trigger and leverage the ability, what you said, in people to give them self-confidence back, that they reclaim their self-confidence and they trust in their own source. And that's I think that's one of the key to the future of leadership. Don't teach and don't preach, but give them and inspire and enthuse them, that they know themselves and they recognize and recover and gratify themselves as adult beings.
Yeah, well said. The research we have in this field is massive. And for example, in terms of family and school, the research that is been having with the permission of the participant to have a month tape recording in every family room, so to speak, or the recording for a whole month of the classroom with the teacher-student interaction show that as also Albert Bandura has massive research on self-efficacy, which is one of the attributes of natural leadership in kids, is that when the teacher in the classroom, the ratio of teachers speaking towards, kids speaking, students speaking, the most effective teachers, above having this quality, constantly, embodying this quality of respect, prizing, empathic understanding, and capacity of contact, they spoke less than their students. Also, they spoke less than bad teachers, dysfunctional teacher, they just the word I, and they were, empowering their kids. For family, we have a lot of research. First of all, what is called, Bowlby, the work of Bowlby on mother style, the first months of life, a secure base or an insecure base. With mother that have a secure base, we have kids growing more healthy and developing more the potentiality. And so forth, if a secure base is offered also in other setting, in school, but it's true also in hospitals. You know, medical doctors that are able to listen and respect the patient and really listen, then they have a better result with their clients. The clients have less post-surgery, secondary problems. So it seems that for a social species like ours, the mutual respect, the mutual understanding, and real contact are good medicine. Not to kill the natural capacity, the wealth that we possess by, our genes, that our evolution has made. So, the research of my field show that actually the pathology is so vast that we call it normality. Why? The normality, we call it exceptional people, or mystics, or poets, or saints, or genius of leaders. But these are normal human capacity. The time is so short, so we have to be brief. Yes?
Thank you so much, Councillor. I would like to express to you a feeling of a bit of disconnect. Maybe I am from a generation like Mr. Nicotan said that did not know any war will be protected. So thank you for all the generation to allow such an earth that could bring us to the way we are. But I believe now that the one that's understanding the Lenin, the Mao of yesterday, they are now businessmen. I believe that Mr. Nicotan this morning was saying that Jesus has been tempted by power, money and glory. You don't find this in states anymore, but you find it in big investment banking, you find it in big corporation. So I believe now that if I had no empathy, no emotion, no sense of care, I would rank first in an MBA and go directly to a law firm or investment banking, etc. So now you kind of see where I'm going with my question. Of course, we do not suffer physically. There is no torture. But mental suffering is real. And I'm questioning whether those guys from Goldman Sachs that made so much money with the surprise, that put Greece or Spain in a state of collapse, are they a sociopath? Should we put them in jail? Because these guys earn so much money, so much power, so much glory. And, I mean, looking at the panel of viewing, we have somebody from the law, from labor, and a psychologist. Is there no label to prevent these people from that behavior? I mean, there must be a social, there must be a level, sociopath, psychopath, I don't know. But there must be something for preventing these guys to be the first. First in MBA, first in salary, wages, you name it. And by the next 10 years, there will be more mental disease than physical suffering in all Western countries. And my question is, if any manager puts one of his employees into burnout, could we put it in jail? And this is a real question.
Well, that's a very interesting point that you're making, and a difficult one because it's so, it's tough what is happening today, so we have less research. But actually, not so little research from the time of Warren Bennis, the father of organizational development, to Argylis, that I worked with personally and applied the theory of Carl Rogers to the world of organizational development. MacGregor, that's another that put the work of Rogers into the. We know that even books, popular books like on excellence, that actually there are a lot of good, not dysfunctional firms that recognize their people as people and respect them. They empower them and they do a lot of things, even allow them to create their startup inside the firm, and then they buy, if they find it useful, the startup from them, or after them they way to be consulted. And it's an interesting thing that the firm that apply this people-oriented strategy are making more profit, not less. When people understand that the best natural capital or natural resources, people, they valorize the people. Interesting enough is that firms usually, if they are producing goods, they really put a lot of maintenance in their machines. But many firms don't put any maintenance to people, because people, they're expendable. They can fire one and the next. But those firms are not so successful, except exactly point the finger in the wound. Actually, it looks like, but I cannot cite you a research, that the crazy world of finance that is actually destroying prosperity and call it a good news, actually it seems with that kind of really dog-eat-dog environment, psychopath and sociopath are on the winning side. And I personally feel like, it seems that you saying, that when persons are destroying, human and natural capital, there should be law pursuing people that are damaging so greatly society. I hope so, at least. But somebody else, like Alexander, wants to comment.
Thank you, Alberto. Thank you for excellent presentation and the discussion, which is thought-provocative. And I wanted to start with your comment, because you said that we're working for IBM and we were told to be moral, we have gone very far. I can assure you that in politics we have gone much further, being immoral today. And actually it is not only, that simplistic way, either money or power or something else. It's all, being there, you get an emotional surcharge. And this costs a lot. I mean, some people, they work for that emotional surcharge. Yes. Being part of those who decide the fates of the world. But I wanted to add a couple of words about this discussion. I think it was very important that people, it was started actually by Volga today, who said that the acceptability on the side of the people is very important of the kind of leadership that they get. And in that sense, I think that the authoritarian rulers, my tongue doesn't pronounce that as a leadership. Rulers, they play on a very ancient sentiment of the human being, because it's not only responsibility that people want to get rid of and to delegate to somebody. It's not only paternalistic state which is important for them. I think that it goes very, very far into the history, and if you remember the meaning of the scapegoat in the Jewish history, ancient history.
I think that for many people it's also a possibility to clean their conscience, just to put like on a scapegoat all their sins, all their, whatever wrongdoing on some person, and to say, when it erupts, like with Stalin, for instance, oh, we didn't know, we are good, we are clean, but we didn't know about all these atrocities. And it happens practically with any authoritarian regime. So it has deep psychological, drivers of that. How to deal with that? I'm not sure that democratic education or education for democracy would help that, because I think that it is necessary step. I would say it's needed, but it's not sufficient for that. Because with the democratic institutions not digested and simply taken as institutions, they could be easily converted into something absolutely different. After all, the Soviet Union Constitution was the most democratic constitution in the world. I mean it. If you will read it, everything was there. But now it was it's a different issue. Today, we have learned, the powers, the authorities have learned how to manipulate anything and to present it. Well, listen, we were talking about what happened here in former Yugoslavia. Now, similar things go in Europe, Russia and Ukraine. And you said, who is fighting? You said normal people are fighting there. I don't know anything about, I don't know as much as you know about the situation here and whether it were just normal people. But I know that now in Ukraine, there are lots of so-called volunteers. There are, of course, part of the regular troops, which are sent not as a regular troops, that's for sure. But also there is a big portion of real volunteers. And mainly these people are what they call it in déclassés. They do not have any, let me say, work. They cannot do anything except fighting because they've gone to Afghanistan, Chechnya, etc., etc. And on top of that, it gives them the feeling of self-esteem, because in an official state propaganda, they are dealt as heroes. When they were living in their villages and small cities before that, they were nothing at all. And that raises the question of not only of democratic education. It raises the question of the, let me say, system that exists in the country. Whether it provides a possibility to the people to have self-respect and to achieve something in their life, or they are totally deprived from these opportunities. I think this is the most important if we want to the real modernization of the society, which is at stake today. And finally, I want maybe to contest what I was saying before. Because I don't want to blame the current leaders and to say that, okay, we are not lucky with the leaders. There were leaders before when we were younger, and today they are not as good as they are. I think they live in a totally different situation. The challenges are much bigger today, and they're not only bigger, because every leader has a dominant, let me say, identity, dominant identity, and it is very strong, But even today, the national leaders, their dominant, their identity is national. And that's the problem, because they cannot put together the interests of the world development, the priorities given always to national agenda, which does not fit into the modern world.
Thank you, Alexander, for this wonderful contribution. It's 3:31, which we were already supposed to finish. So 2 minutes to wrap up the very, points quickly that we start with Professor Nagan that underline that we need to have a mechanism or to invent a mechanism to moderate the excessive power differential between the leaders of people, otherwise that can turn any leadership result pretty sour. He also reminded that, if we look just at the leaders, say, oh, those bad leaders, how unlucky, as Alexander was pointing out even now, we see the picture only once face of the moon, and mechanicistically we have to look like Laswell, Adorno, and Wilhelm Reich and others at the society, how it creates leaders and followers. And so any betterment of society cannot just be either the people of the leader, but has to be of the social construction of that reality, of that society. Professor Kovacevic dramatically tell us that we cannot look at this of the past. The evils are present and operating dramatically, and so we cannot just talk about one mechanism here underlined is the impossible promises of these functional leaders that have a good hypnotic capacity to play their flute and have people go to catastrophe, so to speak, which reminds the research of Bandura about self-efficacy and social efficacy. And then Donato Hinegger Fasilli, that has a tremendous experience all around the world and United Nations Agency, negotiation, it's underline the point of transcending the barriers and recognizing the other is very important, as much as, with some example, taking responsibility for one's own mistake. That's really a sign of good leadership that has certainly have the quality that, by the way, the research of Salvador Madi and Bandura again, are right on the review. Perseveration, you don't win this time. You insist and learn from what is happening. Patient, or sometimes also self-containment after that, courage, and a vision of hope. Actually, unfortunately, time obliges us to pass on, but each one of these topics would be worth at least a day. Thank you for being here with us, and then to the next speaker.